Hello, I'm Rex Butterfield, and I'd like to welcome you to a video about my Quilcom SIM-MBIRA. An MBIRA is played by plucking the tines, the metal tines, usually with the thumb or maybe the forefinger on the right hand, to operate a little bit like a music box. This type of instrument is called a lamellophone. As I hope you gathered from the introductory slideshow, MBIRAs come in many sort of different configurations. They can have a solid body or base. It can be put inside a gore to act as a resonant chamber. And one feature is that all MBIRAs have some sort of what you could call a rattling system, and in the case of this one, bottle tops, you could have buttons. Originally on the old African instruments they used shells and also beads, so that gives a different sort of timbre to the buzz that accompanies the music. Back in the 1950s, an ethnomusicologist called Hugh Tracy loved the MBIRA, but he decided to modernise it and introduce it to the West by making a version called the Kalimba. And this is a typical modern kalimba, and you can see the similarities and differences. And a kalimba can have a solid body or a hollow body with a soundbox. If you've ever heard the term thumb piano, then MBIRAs and kalimbas are what's being referred to. As I always like to do with these simulations, I've provided a background info folder in the zip download, and you can find out a lot more about this class of instrument. The pitch range typically is just over 2 octaves, and modern instruments are generally based on C as the lowest note. So on this synthesizer, it plays from middle C upwards, and of course on the MIDI keyboard it's chromatic, whereas most real instruments are either diatonic or even pentatonic with their tuning. Chromatic thumb pianos do exist, and they cover a wider range, and these are referred to as array kalimbas. Now, like all my Sim series plugins, no samples are used. They use pure synthetic techniques, so that means we have a range of adjustments that we can make which you wouldn't really be able to do with a fixed sample set. So I'll now run through what the controls do with some audio demonstrations. So first off, I'm going to talk about the Rattlers. So here we can set the size of the Rattlers, which goes from beads through shells, buttons, up to bottle tops. So that would be a bead sound, buttons, bottle tops, and we can go a bit beyond that for something that doesn't sound very real. Now the vary control makes variations to the rattling sound based on the notes played. So when turned down to minimum, we get the same sound for every note. If we turn it up to maximum, to show you the more extreme example, you can hear the variation there between individual notes rattles. Now, by experimenting with my own Kalimba with bottle tops placed on the Soundbox, I realised that below a certain level of pluck you don't get the rattle because the bottle caps aren't energised. So this is velocity sensitive, and I'll just demonstrate the effect of velocity at very low level. And you can see that that affects the amount and quality of the rattle. Now, unsurprisingly, the level knob adjusts the level of the rattle sound. And if we turn it down to 0 with no rattle, it becomes a kalimba. So I'll leave it as a kalimba with no rattle, because then it's easier to demonstrate the effect of these controls. The length, when it's set to ×1, is the decay time, and at 1 it's the same as my own kalimba. We can of course adjust it. Of course, as you would expect, lower notes have a longer decay than the higher ones, so that's also simulated. Now the pluck knob controls the hardness of the initial pluck, and this can be done with the fleshy part of the thumb, which is unusual, or a rubber thimble, which gives a softer sound, through the thumbnail, which is the normal method, up to a pluck ring that is worn by the player. So that is simulated with the pluck knob. Now, as I found out with my own Kalimba instrument, when you pluck a key, all the others get slightly energized through the body. So I've labeled this knob Sympathy, as in sympathetic resonance, but it isn't actually sympathetic resonance, because all the keys of the lower octave tend to be excited slightly. So if I play a higher note and turn the sympathy up, you'll hear the effect of that. And about halfway matches the sound of my own instrument. So now we come on to the Soundbox, and if the Soundbox, the solid, the knob that's labelled solid here is turned fully down, you'll get a solid baseboard for a Kalimba or an MBIRA. And if you turn the solid knob up, it changes to hollow, and then you can set the amount of resonance and the size of the resonant cavity. And at the higher levels, it simulates a large gourd into which the MBIRA is fitted. Now, as you might expect, the aux semi and fine knobs adjust the tuning of the instrument, but here we have a bad knob, and from what I've heard on lots of YouTube videos and recordings, MBIRAs are very often not perfectly in tune. You can adjust the tuning by sliding each time backwards or forwards, but they rarely sound perfectly in tune. So here you can adjust the degree of tuning errors and the distribution of those errors. So when it's perfect, and let's make it worse than it really should be. If you make it really bad, it's horrible. So about there is the sweet spot in my opinion. Now, as I'm sure you noticed on the introductory videos, and you're probably already aware of the fact that the MBIRA and Kalimba, they're very small instruments, so the sound source is pretty much mono. But on an array Kalimba, which is much wider, you can get more of a stereo effects. So if I turn the Rattlers down and the stereo width up, then on the left you have the lower notes, and on the right the higher notes. And that's probably best appreciated when listening on headphones. So that's my Quilcom SIM-MBIRA for you, and in the user guide there's more background information about the controls and the instrument itself, so you might want to read through that. There's a room effect and a reverb and a built-in recorder, which is explained in more detail. So I shall play out with another hopefully familiar lamellophone type of sound, and until the next time, bye.